for your testimony, and before I get into a couple more remarks, I just want to quickly associate myself with what you had to say about Ukraine and the important connection there between what happens there and what our adversaries or potential adversaries in the Western Pacific might draw. That's an important linkage that I think sometimes gets lost in the debate. They are very closely tied together. Chairman Rogers, critics of this annual defense measure use its size to justify their opposition. And there are certainly cases in which large pieces of legislation equate to bureaucratic bloat. Yet in this instance, it seems that the 1,200-plus pages represent hundreds of provisions offered by individual members of Congress on both sides of the aisle through regular order. On behalf of the men and women at Tinker Air Force Base in my district, thank you for your efforts on one such provision related to the F-35 oxygen shock, very important in my part of the world. We throw the term regular order around here quite frequently. Some use its absence as a reason not to support something. But when regular order is the norm, some reject the final product if it doesn't perfectly align with their preferences. The challenge your committee faced this year was significant. Produce a forward-looking authorization measure that a Republican House can support and that a Democratic president will sign into law. That will save taxpayer money while at the same time giving our men and women in uniform the tools they need to protect our country amid escalating global instability and turmoil while still making sure that they can put food on the table at home for their families. And I think you guys working together did an exceptional job in this legislation achieving that. Chairman, let me ask you, how many hours would you estimate were spent in hearings and briefings leading up to the introduction of this bill?
We had 128 hearings, over 35 classified briefings with over 125 hours total consumed in those.
And how many hours were spent in markup at the subcommittee and full committee level?
Well, as a former HASC member, you will find this interesting. We spent 15 hours in markup, but it would have been a lot longer. This was the first year we used electronic voting, which really, it cut an extra 3 or 4 hours off the hearing. But still, even with that, we spent 15 hours on it, to answer your question.
And how many member ideas were considered through the committee amendment process at the markup?
760 amendments were considered, 731 were adopted.
And how many hours were spent working with members on the 1,500-plus amendments submitted to the rules?
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I want to say those who submitted to our staff in committee was well north of 1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, and these ideas get whittled down. So sorry, it's just that the staff had to go through a lot more amendments even in committee. But I'm sorry.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, again, members may disagree with the policies contained in this bill. That's expected, and that's why we have floor amendment process. But the process you ran to produce this critical piece of legislation, I think, is exceptionally impressive. And again, both of you deserve the credit for that. You and your staff and the ranking member and his staff deserve the appreciation of the entire body. This is a process that reflects the best of this institution and one that I wish more committees, frankly, would examine and follow. Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Smith, this is directed to both of you. What's the practical impact on the men and women in uniform if this legislation is not enacted this year?
The bill provides for critical authorities requested by our military to stay ahead of China. Failing to pass this bill means the military can't build barracks, family housing, and child care facilities. It means the military can't pay service members recruiting and retention bonuses. It means the service members will pay more for child care and housing. It means more delays, less access to mental health and for military families.
Same question to you, Ranking
I completely agree with what the chairman just said. He laid it out perfectly.
And what would be the impact on our allies if this legislation is not enacted this year? And again, that's addressed to both of you.
It just sends a terrible message to our allies, especially China, about the escalating threats. This bill includes important new authorities to improve defense training in coordination with Taiwan, which, as you heard, we just came from there. That is critically important right now if we want to deter Chinese aggression. It strengthens the defense partnerships and intelligence sharing and logistics support partnerships with our allies in the Pacific, and it includes provisions requested by our combatant commanders to counter Chinese presence in Africa and South America.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that it's the message it sends to partners in countries around the world. This is a global competition, and countries all over the world are looking at it, and they'd rather be with us. They would. But China's a fact of life. Even Russia, to some degree, is a fact of life, depending on where you are in the world. And if they don't know that we're going to be there to support them, to partner with them, to help them make sure they meet their needs, then they got no choice but to do what China's telling them to do. It really helps achieve that balance, and it gives these countries a counterbalance to China's power influence in the world. Without it, it sends a terrible message and pushes those countries to have to make deals they'd rather not make with China and Russia and others.
Well, I think you both have succeeded in that, and thank you. Last question, and I'll direct this to you, Chairman. And it's, we have concerns on our side of the aisle in this legislation as well. A number of members do. So how does this legislation fulfill the commitment that our conference, the Republican conference, made to the nation when the American people entrusted us with leading the House of Representatives?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We promise to strengthen our national security by conducting vigorous oversight of the Biden administration and by moving common sense legislation to address the administration's national security failures. The Armed Services Committee has done that. We've conducted dozens of hearings, briefings, and meetings over the last 6 months. We've hauled in the Biden defense officials and forced them to publicly account for their actions. Now we're considering an NDAA that will carry out that accountability. It will force the administration to stop spending money on left-wing divisive programs. It cancels and reins in out-of-control acquisition programs by saving $40 billion a year and restricts funding for Pentagon officials who fail to comply with congressional intent. This NDAA delivers on our commitment to the conference.
Thank you. And I'll just make the point once more. I want to congratulate you both because you've done what a committee is supposed to do. That is, you've worked together hour on hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, and brought us a consensus product that both sides agreed on almost unanimously. So again, that just speaks volumes about both of you and the manner in which you worked together and the process that you followed to bring us this. And I hope the Congress can do as well a good a job, frankly, as you guys did leading in committee. And we'll see how that goes going forward. With that, let me yield to my very good